to the handle. So as we see, we have the handle here, and you can see how that has the tang slot. One thing that you'll notice, and especially once we take off the leather wrap, which we'll do here, I have a set of X-Acto knives. So another tool that you will need will be X-Acto knives, and we'll just kind of cut off the windlass seam. Now, one thing that was kind of funny about me when I first had my sword of Rovin, I don't know why I thought that, but I really thought that the wood was actually grooved rather than having risers. I don't know why. Maybe it's just the way it felt on the leather, the way the risers were set, but I thought this was actually a grooved handle. It is not. It just has a spiral riser under wrap. And we can see here, and like I said, I'm not worried about saving the leather, so I'll just kind of start tearing and ripping it off. You know, there's some mild glue used, and, you know, they use an actual leather riser, which is nice for these swords. I know some windlass swords that I've taken apart have had like hemp cord risers. One, for example, was the windlass Arbedo, and then another was the windlass European sword. Didn't have actual leather for risers, which again, not a big thing, but as far as just fit, finish, attractiveness and things, it definitely deters. So as you can see with this Rovin handle, it's made of a decent hardwood. Kind of hard to tell what it is, maybe a birch or you know, something, but yeah, kind of more of a darker wood. The grit, and this is something that windlass tends to do too, is they don't do the sandwich method of handles. Now, what a sandwich method is you will see that most, if you take apart a, you know, especially a European sword, this is also usually the way Japanese katana suka are done, but they will have a seam here where the two halves are glued together. That's what is known as the sandwich method. The method windlass use, which is technically more traditional, is the burr method, as I've heard it called, where basically what they do is they will, you know, drill or carve into the wood core after it's shaped, and then they will take the tang when it's still hot, and they will hammer the handle down so the hot wood kind of burns in to the grip and comes out, and it normally makes a kind of more of a firmer solid grip, because the tang itself is actually making the wood, you know, kind of the handle kind of fit, and usually it'll stay tighter and flush. With that, like I said, I think they kind of squeezed a little epoxy in just to make sure it was safe and secure, because it's not always guaranteed. Definitely, you know, when you sandwich and you're able to kind of shape the tang in and put those halves over, you're able to get a more definite feel. But it is a more traditional method. It's what they did, you know, back in the medieval period. So yeah, so there's our handle. So now it's taken apart. So we have all our parts and pieces. We have our pommel and guard, everything apart. So as we can see, this is what the sword looks like apart. Again, one of the nice things with windlass is they have a nice thick tang, and then also the threaded portion is actually, they thread it themselves rather than spot welding, which many production manufacturers do. I am not a fan of spot welding. Primarily, a spot weld is potentially risk to fail, especially when it's done on a pommel, because if you ever gripped a medieval sword, you know, usually two hands, and then you tend to also put your hand down on the pommel and use the pommel as leverage. Now that is, in Western martial arts, you know, considered the norm. you put your hand on the pommel, be it an arming sword or a long sword. So when you have a potential stress risk there at the at the pommel end where most are screwed on or anything, for example, with like cold steel or even some of the Hanway Tinker models where they have that spot welding, can be prone to fail. So that is definitely one of the things, even though a lot of people prefer peening over, screw-on pommels or external nuts, or even internal nuts like the Hanway Tinkers or Angus trims. They really, with having that actual, full tang that's threaded is definitely a benefit. And you can see kind of how, even though it's rounded, how thick that tang is, which is definitely a bonus and adds some definite structural integrity. So now that we've gotten the sword apart, our next step is going to be rewrapping the grip. So to do that, I'll kind of show you the tools that we will need. So the first thing that we will need is some linen cord. Now this is just some, cotton and yarn you can pick up pretty much in any do-it-yourself, not do-it-yourself, but arts and crafts store, or even in, certain retail stores and things like Walmart and stuff. It's basically just your typical white cotton linen thread for like sewing and things. They come in these big bundles, so you'll always have plenty. I bought this guy, I want to say years ago, and I'm still, even with all the sword handles I've customized, still haven't ran out yet. But yeah, they cost about $5, and basically what this will do is this will reinforce our grip by offering the linen underwrap, and that is going to be important because not only does it kind of give a little extra strength to the grip, but also it adds what a lot of people like, that aesthetic look of the textured leather when the leather's bound and wrapped and tightened, where you get that nice extra little grip from that linen undercord when it goes over the leather. So that's going to be the first step that we're going to do with the handle. As far as glue, now these are two glues that I prefer to use. I mean, you can use any super glue. I kind of like the Gorilla Glue because it's a little more jelly, a little more controlled. A lot of the liquid super glues tend to kind of drip and drain, get it all over your fingers and things. And this is definitely a lot more controlled, so you can kind of pinpoint where you want it. It dries fast and has a good bond to just about any material. Another glue, now this is going to be our exact glue that we're going to actually bond the leather to the handle. And this is from Loctite, and it's known as Go-To glue. And it's basically a synthetic 5-minute epoxy. I like this because it dries slow. It has a nice bond to like leather, and is a little bit more workable, a lot less kind of strong smelling as most 5-minute epoxies, but definitely any 5-minute epoxy of your choice would work. I definitely suggest a 5-minute epoxy simply because you don't want to, like, for example, super glue the whole grip, because as you'll see when you're wrapping the leather and trying to get a nice seam and everything, you don't want it super bonded, because if you have a mistake or an error, you're going to want to be able to peel it up and get it back. So that's the benefit of this Go-To glue or other 5-minute epoxies that are not strong bonding, is that they're able to hold and bond, but definitely they take more time to cure, so you're not stuck wasting leather or having to redo the handle and strip it off. The next tool that we'll need for application, and this isn't really necessary, you can use other things or even your fingers if you don't mind getting glue on them, but I like to use these little sponge brushes for application, basically just to kind of spread the glue on after I have the linen cord. That benefits because you can just get an even get the glue nice and even. That way you don't have little bubbles or little gobs of glue that might kind of stick out and protrude and make your handle look ugly or even feel uncomfortable. Like if you have a little burb like on the end here and it's in your palm, it's going to be uncomfortable gripping the sword. The next thing we're going to need is riser material. Now I tend to use 1mm or 1.5 millimeter leather cord. I usually use the round variety because I like just kind of how it grips and feels. You can definitely use more squared leather if that's what you like, or even go up thicker in diameter to like 2mm or something if that's what you like. I got smaller hands, as you see, so I definitely prefer to have more of a thinner grip. I'm not one of those fat handle guys. So when I use the risers, sometimes a riser can be a little too big, a little too thick, and it can make your grip uncomfortable, especially when you're trying to get good edge alignment and have your knuckles lined up. So I prefer to use kind of a smaller cord just because you get the aesthetic look, you'll get you'll get that presentation, and you'll get that nice grip, but it won't just be too bulky and uncomfortable. And the thinner tends to, the thinner diameter cord tends to just kind of work better with the leather too. You're able to kind of see the indentation more, and it adds to the presentation. Next is just some simple tools that we will use for the leather wrap. So I got some needle nose pliers just to kind of pinch and work the cord, and then of course kind of snip it with the wire cutter portion. And then, as of course, we'll need X-Acto knives to kind of cut and shape the leather. And also I got some spare blades because ironically these blades don't really last. They can dull quick, and the sharper the blade, the easier it is going to be to kind of shape that leather and get it nice and get your seams really nice and in shape, which is important. I also have some scissors just in case I have some frays or anything that I need to kind of touch up. I tend to use barber scissors simply because they're thin, they're very sharp, and they definitely get the job done better than more of your standard scissors. And then next, of course, we have leather. Now this is my big bag of leather, different scraps and stuff that I've used, different colors over the years. You guys might even recognize a few colors from the swords in my reviews. So we'll use leather, and we'll also use my cutting board and my ruler to kind of cut the leather to the right shape and size to wrap the handle, and that way we can get it nice and flush and have a good shape for the grip, so it looks nice and it looks as presentationable as better. So next we will start wrapping the handle, and so I'll be right back. I'm going to get that set up, and then we'll be back and we'll start wrapping this handle. All right, welcome back. So we are ready to start wrapping this leather handle. So the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to get off this old glue and kind of leftover leather fuzz from the previous grip. Just a simple, wood sandpaper will do. Right now I am using 110 grit. You can go higher in grit if you want, but normally just to get this glue and epoxy off that most manufacturers use, it doesn't take too much effort, and you can normally get it off pretty easy with anywhere from 100 to 80 grit. Plus, we also don't want to affect the shape of our grip anymore, unless that's what you're interested in. Personally, I like the shape and size of the roving grip, so I won't be doing any customization to this handle per se, but I will have another handle that I will do customization and show you how to shape and sand a handle in following video on this series. So just pretty easy, just getting the glue And usually this glue, because they also use similar like 5-minute epoxy, it's pretty easy to come off because it is, you know, synthetic and it gels, so it's pretty easy to get off. And usually you can sometimes even just rub the glue off with your thumb, as you see here, and not really have to worry about sanding unless you really have to kind of get the bond off. See that? Pretty easy to clean this handle off. I also have some paper towels here for cleanup or anything that kind of helps kind of rub things off and things. So I'm going to go back with some paper and get the rest of it up that's not wanting to kind of come off. And basically what we're doing here is we are trying to get the grip as smooth as possible. That way we don't have little lumps and bumps in the linen undercord. All right, excellent, nice and smooth. So our next step is to get the linen cord going. Now, one suggestion that I do have, especially with wasted grips, is that you start at the smaller end and then wrap down. Normally, because if you start at a fat end, the cord is going to want to fall down and it'll kind of make the linen unflush, and you'll have to do a lot more hand work to kind of get it to shape. So to start this, we'll just put a little bit of the cord down the tang slot of the handle. This isn't really necessary, but I kind of like to do it because it just helps keep the general part out of the way. So when I glue this and I start wrapping, then I can kind of get a nice little bond going and not have that extra tip in the way. So we'll just take our super glue and we'll apply a thin layer at the end here, and we'll just wrap, since this handle's off compared to one that's kind of up against a pommel, we will just kind of go completely around a little bit. That way we can make sure that we don't get any shifting or movement. Now, if you're not a fan of having super glue on your fingers or thumbs, definitely grab yourself a pair of you know, kind of latex gloves or something to kind of help with this. But just kind of gently line up the the seam to the and then just kind of start wrapping as you go. Now this is probably one of the more tedious parts of wrapping handles, and of course the longer the handle the worst, which can be very tedious with a long handle. For example, if you watched me do my re-review episode on my Windless Heroes War Sword, that was one that was 13-inch handle, so that was actually quite a tedious handle. Plus that one was peened, so I actually didn't take the handle off because I didn't want to mess with the peening. So yeah, so that will be another video too, because I know a lot of you are saying, okay, well, you're showing me how to do a handle that can be taken off, but how do you do a handle that can't be taken off, because I'm not going to break the peen on a peen sword. So that'll be also another video. I'll show you how to customize a grip that has been is together on the sword, and also how to wrap a leather handle with a full sword connected to the handle. So so we'll just keep wrapping here. And as you can see, basically, you're just trying to keep this flush and around. You're noticing that maybe that I'm not using any more glue on the grip, and that's mainly because it's not necessary. If you have a tight enough turn on, and you're keeping this nice and tight and flush, you won't need the glue on this on the handle, because if you ever want to re-customize it or something and you need to take that linen cord off, you're not going to want glue on the linen cord, because it's just going to make you have to work that handle more and struggle with that. When the linen cord is actually glued via to bond the leather, the glue will seep into this linen cord and tighten it and strengthen it. So that is where you're going to get that support from the adhesive on the linen cord. Right now, again, we're just kind of focusing on getting the grip just wrapped around with the full linen cord. And again, this can take some time, so I'll probably cut the video here and then continue wrapping it, but I'll speed it up. That way you guys aren't sitting here for the 10-15 minutes it's probably going to take for me to wrap this around. So little quick speed wrap, and then I will be moving on to showing you how to get your risers set up. All right, so as you can see, we got the linen cord wrap over our wood core handle. So, as you were probably seeing as I was going, it can be a little tedious, but definitely one of the important parts of the sword grip, regrip process. Um, Basically, what you're looking for is to have everything nice and flush. You don't really want the linen, the cord to be overwrapped. It can create little bumps and bumps and kind of ruin the finish as far as aesthetics, as well as just make the grip kind of feel weird and uncomfortable in places. So you definitely want to keep it nice and tight, as you probably saw me kind of thumbing it down to keep it nice and tight. But also, you, like I said, you want to avoid overlaps like that. I figured we would do the end points together at regular speed. That way you guys can kind of see how to finish it and how to go from there. So primarily what we're going to do is we're going to, similar to the bottom, we're going to take our glue and we're just going to create a nice little seam of glue right at the top here for the final few overwraps to adhere to. That way that the top is nice and flush and you don't have any gaps in your linen cord. And like I said, when you use like the gel stuff like this, it definitely benefits by not being too liquid to where it drips, but also to where you can get some time to work with it to kind of get these end points right. All right, so basically what you want to do now is just kind of take an end and kind of mesh it together in the edge there. That way that it will kind of stay flush and hold. Let it sit and dry for a minute. I mean, if you have a little bit of gap, it's not too serious. The linen cord doesn't need to be super perfect, but you definitely want it to be as flush as possible. Up here at the top, it's not going to matter too much, especially if you put a riser up here, because it's kind of going to overlap that and you ain't going to really feel it or see it, which is why I'm not too worried about the top. But once you get it nice and dry, just take your scissors or your X-Acto knife and just tip off the end and just give it a little tug if it cut. Just like that. And there we go. Nice and finished. Now as far as the end, kind of the same thing. We're just going to take the last piece that wasn't glued, the free piece, and just kind of nip it there and then kind of just work it down to where it's not like overly bumped or frayed. And there we have it. So we have our linen wrapped grip. So that's definitely step one. Step two is going to be how we want to do the risers. Now, normally you'll see I do a 3 riser configuration, which is pretty common for long swords. I thought we'd do something a little fancier with this one and do multiple risers on it. So with that, kind of what we need to do is generally measure the handle if you want these risers flush. So this handle is right at about 6 inches. So in that sense, so basically what we want to do is with 6 inches, if you want to have the risers nice and spaced to where they're kind of comfortable, what we're going to do is we're going to do a riser every I think what we'll do is a riser every 1/2 inch. So we'll have a riser here, 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 here. Yeah, as you can see. But anyway, so the way we were going to do that is that we normally just kind of measure it out with the ruler, or you can use your little board here. And at every 1/2 inch, just kind of make a little mark. That way we can have our risers flush with each other, and we don't have to worry about it looking too ugly. If you don't want this many risers on the sword, definitely cut it down and maybe space them 1 inch apart. But with this one, we're just going to do so there we have our kind of riser marks. And then what you're going to want to do is just kind of, and this is where the linen cord helps too, because what we're going to do is we're just going to draw around in a circle where we're going to have the risers. And you can use the linen cord to kind of guide that, and just take a strip of it and kind of just slowly circle around. Again, if your drawing isn't perfectly flush, it's not a big issue, because you're going to be able to kind of see that more when you apply the leather riser. And like I said, this isn't a definite, this is more of a guide to kind of see. So again, if you need to kind of adjust it like I'm doing here, don't feel bad about it. Again, just kind of set the risers the way you want them, or if you're not a fan of risers, you don't need any at all. I personally like risers because they do have a function as far as giving you a tighter grip, non-slip grip to the handle, but also I just like the way they look. They are aesthetically pleasing to me, and I definitely enjoy when risers are, kind of done a little more artistically and made to look nice and add to the aesthetic and presentation of a sword. Sometimes they can be a little overbearing and detract from the comfortability or function of a grip. So yeah, there's definitely circumstances where I'm not a fan of certain riser designs and styles, but overall, for the basic simple round style risers, you can't really go wrong. And again, it is historically accurate, and if they did it then, there had to have been a reason, right? And they definitely knew how to use these swords more than us because it was part of their everyday life as far as a man-at-arms or a knight or a soldier. So if you're using or carrying a sword day to day, you're definitely going to want it to be at your expectation of what you want. And in that sense, then, yes, the risers were beneficial to the swordsmen of the Middle Ages. Almost done, just one more, bear with me, and then we'll set the risers. All right, excellent. So, put the Sharpie aside and we'll have a look at our finished layout. So, the next step is going to be setting the risers. Now, normally what I'll do here is I'll just kind of pre-cut my risers off the spool. So normally I like to give an extra maybe 1/4 inch or so, just so I have area to kind of shape and have room to kind of cut when I need to make them flush. So don't worry about wasting this cord. Like I said, this stuff's $5 to $6, maybe even less depending on where you buy it. And you know, it comes in a big long spool that'll last you a long time, similar to the linen. You shouldn't have to worry too much about running out if you get a spool like this. So basically what I'm going to do is I have my general size, so we'll just mark it there with the fingernail and then cut it. Now, if you're not a super big fan of really round, you can take, for example, the needle nose and flatten it a little bit, as this leather cord is pretty malleable. So you can kind of give it a little more flatter, squared shape if that's what you desire. But yeah, so anyway, so yeah, so let's get some of these going. And normally I'm not too worried about, like I said, wasting leather. So as the handle does, you know, kind of taper, I'm not going to worry too much about wasting leather and getting these exact to size. Obviously the big one, you know, the top is going to be the most flush around, but and normally what you can do pretty easily too is once you get a generic cut, just kind of shape it as is, and you can take your clippers and clip it like that. And so we need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 risers on this one. Just kind of nip them as you go. And we're not too worried about length because the handle gets smaller as it tapers. So yeah, we might be wasting a little leather, but not the end of the world. All right, so we should have all our leathers. I kind of snipped that one when I was flattening it, so we'll toss that one. But we have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So we have our 11 risers. And again, like I said, if you want to flatten those out, and like I said, just avoid the cutting portion. Unfortunately, I did that on my first one. You can just kind of give these a little squeeze, flatten them down a little more, and make them a little flatter. But yeah, so kind of helps out that way if you're interested. If you want them round, keep them round. Usually it kind of depends on the handle too. If it's a rounder Ovaltine handle like this one, I mean, round's not going to bother, but if it's more squared or octagon, you might want to flatten those risers out a little more just so they don't stick out so much round. It can kind of make it look funny, I guess, or maybe even feel uncomfortable. So to start, we're going to take our super glue and just give a little dot here where we want to start the riser, like that. Then we're just going to take the end of the riser, press it down, let that glue bond. Now, something to be careful with, moving around the risers too much, since these are kind of coated black, which, you know, they kind of usually come with some kind of coating because it's usually used for like jewelry, like bracelets and stuff, this type of leather. If you peel it off a little too much, it can actually peel off the coating, and then the coating will be stuck to the glue and not the leather. So be careful with that if you're moving around too much. But normally you can get, after you get that, you can get a general feel of where you're going to be in regards to keeping it flush and round. You can kind of move it away or up and down if you need to, just slightly to make it more flush. But yeah, this looks pretty good so far. So we're going to continue gluing. And just, and once you get that first part done, you can kind of get the whole thing if you're comfortable where it is. You know, as far as like your line and it goes that you drew, and just kind of give it a nice firm press. Maybe blow on it a little bit to dry the glue a little faster. And then we're going to work it all the way to the last quarter. So go ahead and give a little glue around this corner here. Give it a nice firm press. And then we're going to butt up the end and make it flush. Now how you'll want to do that is normally what I do is I will just kind of, this is why I like to kind of over wrap them, but you can kind of, you don't want it too short because then you're going to have a gap in between the risers and it'll feel funny and it'll look ugly too. So you just want to kind of line up that a little bit and then just gently saw down the tip. And you want to leave it, like I said, a little bit of extra. You don't want it exactly flush from your cut because you'll be able to kind of work it in. Since it's leather, it's malleable, you'll be able to work it in and make it more flush. But we just kind of want to cut this, and we can do it this way. Now once we get our little mark, and just cut it down just that little bit, and then work it down so that's going to butt right up. So then we want to finish our glue seam. Draw this glue down. Put a little bit on the end too, that way They bond together. And just use your fingernail to kind of butt those up. If it's a little misshapen because you cut it and it kind of got edges or an angle, just go ahead and squeeze those in, and that glue will hold that to where it stays nice and round. And there you have it. You have your first riser. So that's how you do risers. So what I'll probably do is I'll probably cut the video right here, finish the rest of my risers since you guys kind of saw how to do them, and then we will move on to getting the leather started.